welcome to the debate. Right now, your heart beats about 100,000 times a day. Your blood sugar fluctuates hundreds of times while you sleep. And the trillions of bacteria in your gut are engaged in this constant invisible chemical dialogue.
Right.
Yet, if you visit a doctor today, they will likely make a life or death decision based on a single blood test taken on a random Tuesday. We are fundamentally treating human beings based on fragmented, isolated snapshots.
Yeah, I mean, we rely on the cardiologist looking at an EKG in one soundproof room, while the endocrinologist looks at a fasting glucose test in an entirely different room. Neither of them sees the complete picture.
Exactly. They don't talk.
Now, they don't see how a poor night's sleep is elevating the patient's cortisol, which is simultaneously spiking their blood sugar and straining their heart.
From reactive medicine, where we wait for something to break and then try to fix it, to predictive preventative care.
Which is entirely powered by artificial intelligence.
Yes, AI processing literally zettabytes of biological and environmental data. So, our central question today emerges directly from the source material documenting this incredible transformation. We are asking, what is the primary driver of AI's transformative power in healthcare?
Right.
Is it the macro-level integration of massive multimodal global data sets, what we might call population-scale harmonization? Or is it the micro-level decoding of highly complex, localized biological mechanisms, like single-cell, genomic, and bacterial precision?
And it is easily the most critical academic question of modern medical science. Because, well, where we decide to focus our computing power will essentially determine the future of human longevity.
So, to lay our cards on the table, I will be arguing that AI's true power is structural and integrative. Its greatest triumph is weaving disparate, chaotic data streams into unified population health insights.
And I will be arguing that AI's true power is biological and granular. The revolution is in deciphering previously intractable molecular and microbial complexities down at the level of the individual patient.
Let's get into it. As we established, the human body generates a ceaseless torrent of data. 3 billion base pairs of genes, hundreds of daily glucose spikes, thousands of microvariations in heart rate. But when that data is siloed,
it's useless.
It is practically useless. AI's greatest triumph here is multimodal fusion. We are talking about cross-referencing physiological, behavioral, and environmental data using highly sophisticated knowledge graphs.
You're referring to the mapping of nodes and edges, creating a massive web of correlations.
Yes, but let's break down how that actually works for the listener. Think about how an AI transformer model learns a language. It predicts the next word in a sentence by understanding the context of the words around it, right?
Sure.
Well, we're now using multimodal transformers, like a system called Clip Health, to do this with the human body. Its language is your physiological data. It learns to read a retinal scan from an eye doctor and simultaneously read a genetic sequence.
Finding the hidden grammatical rules, essentially.
Exactly. It finds the rules that connect a visual symptom in your eye to a specific genetic mutation, or SNP. By fusing those different modes of data, it predicts diabetic retinopathy 15% better than traditional methods.
Wow, 15%?
Yeah, and when you scale this up to a macro level, it saves populations. Take Israel's Khalid healthcare system. They are preempting flu-driven metabolic crashes by cross-referencing 5 million electronic health records with municipal wastewater and mobile phone mobility data.
Wait, wastewater and mobility data?
Yeah, it's wild. They are seeing the crash coming before the patient even feels a symptom. That massive macro-level integration is what averts an estimated 40% of preventable deaths.
I come at it from a different way. Broad data integration is impressive, I won't deny that. But it is entirely secondary to AI's ability to solve impossible biological puzzles at the microscopic level. You brought up the torrent of data in the human body, so let's look at the microbiome.
Okay.
We are talking about 39 trillion microorganisms living inside us. They outnumber our own human cells 10 to 1. Until very recently, analyzing this ecosystem was too complex and too expensive, because traditional laboratory culturing missed about 99% of those species. They simply wouldn't grow in a petri dish.
Wait, before you go further, let's make sure we don't lose anyone, including me. When you talk about the data being too complex to analyze, the material specifically mentions overcoming the hurdle of shotgun sequencing data.
Yes.
Walk me through that, because it sounds like looking for a needle in a haystack, where the hay is also made of needles.
That is actually a perfect analogy. Imagine taking a massive encyclopedia, blowing it to pieces with a shotgun, and then trying to read the pages by looking at millions of tiny, disconnected confetti shreds. That is what shotgun sequencing does to DNA.
Oh, wow. That sounds impossible.
A single metagenomic sample from a patient's stool yields up to 100 gigabases of fragmented genetic data. Manual assembly of that confetti is utterly futile. AI's true power is deconvolving that chaotic data.
So how does it do it?
It uses topic modeling and algorithms called autoencoders to compress that massive amount of noise, find the underlying patterns, and reconstruct the sequences to identify specific, uncultured bacterial communities that we never even knew existed.
Right.
Predicting broad population trends from wastewater matters far less than AI's ability to use deep learning, like Google's Deep Variant, which achieves 99.9% accuracy to distinguish a true genetic variant from mere sequencing noise. AI is fundamentally decoding the microscopic building blocks of disease.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on where actual prevention happens. Because identifying a genetic variant in a lab doesn't automatically translate to keeping a population alive. Public health systems thrive on AI aggregates, not just individual molecular decoding. If we look at the locus of prevention, global surveillance is what moves the needle. Take Blue Dot's global network. They are just looking at one person's microbiome. They are tracking antimicrobial resistance by fusing international travel data with sewer DNA across borders.
Tracking a pathogen's movement across a map isn't the same as understanding its biological mechanism to stop it from replicating, though.
It absolutely is. If your goal is public health intervention and resource allocation, look at how Gavi operates. They are using AI to optimize vaccine doses for 100 different countries simultaneously by factoring in incredibly complex herd immunity curves.
Okay, but...
Or consider the UK's NHS AI lab. They have deployed 10 million risk engines across general practices to prioritize who gets statins, which prevents an estimated 100,000 heart events yearly. That macro-level surveillance is what creates a preventative shield over a population.
Right.
Understanding the microbiology of a statin is useless if you can't figure out the optimal way to distribute it to 10 million people based on their layered risk factors.
See, I argue systemic prevention happens at the biological individual level. Let's take insulin resistance. This is the silent saboteur fueling our global epidemics of obesity and type 2 diabetes, a crisis that is projected to hit 540 million people by 2025.
It's massive, yeah.
AI doesn't solve this by looking at broad urban trends or mapping supply chains. It gets granular.
You're referring to AI replacing traditional clinical tests.
Exactly, because the traditional tests are failing us. The absolute gold standard for detecting insulin resistance is something called the hyperinsulinemic euglycemic clamp.
Which is a mouthful.
Right? And it is entirely lab-bound, it is incredibly expensive, it takes hours, and it is totally impractical for billions of people. Even the standard HbA1c blood tests that most people get, they lag by months. You are seeing a snapshot of the past.
So AI gives you the present.
AI steps in and devours real-world individual signals as they happen. We're using deep neural networks, specifically long short-term memory networks, or LSTMs.
Let me pause you there just to clarify for the audience. LSTMs are a specific type of AI architecture that is uniquely good at remembering the order of a sequence, right? They don't just look at isolated data points, they look at the timeline.
Exactly, the timeline. Biology is a sequence of events. LSTMs process 14 straight days of continuous glucose monitor time series data. They watch how your blood sugar reacts minute by minute after you eat, after you sleep, after you exercise.
Right, that continuous flow.
In a recent Mayo Clinic study spanning the US, Europe, and Asia, these LSTM networks took that continuous wrist-worn data and predicted the Matsuda index, which is the proxy for that wildly expensive clinical clamp, with 88% accuracy.
Oh, wow, 88% just from a wearable?
Yes. That is micro-level, individual biology being decoded in real time. The AI is learning the unique biological rhythm of your specific body. It's not just a population trend, it is personalized prevention at an unprecedented scale.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it quite differently. Focusing only on individual continuous glucose data or bacterial DNA is like engineering a brilliant, highly efficient combustion engine, but completely ignoring the global highway system.
Okay?
The engine is useless without the roads. Without massive infrastructural integration across the US, Europe, and Brazil's SUS healthcare system, your incredibly accurate microdata remains trapped in local silos.
I agree that data scale matters for training, but the model's predictive power fundamentally comes from its ability to process the physiological sequence of the individual.
But that predictive power is entirely dependent on overcoming infrastructural chaos, which I argue is the fundamental hurdle AI solves. Think about the reality of global medical data. You have US hospitals using a software system called Epic. You have European hospitals using entirely different systems like TrackCare or Cerner.
Right, they're siloed.
The file formats are totally heterogeneous. They don't speak the same language. AI's revolutionary breakthrough is harmonization. It maps these disparate systems together using standardized ontologies like FEAR and SNOMED-CT.
We are reducing the AI revolution to IT management?
No, we are elevating IT management to save lives because AI does this while using federated learning. For anyone listening who looks at their Apple Watch or continuous glucose monitor and wonders, is my private health data being sucked into a massive server to train a global AI? This is where federated learning comes in.
Because the data stays local.
Exactly. The AI model is sent down to your device, it learns from your personal biological rhythms, and then only the mathematical insights are sent back to the central server. Your raw data never leaves your device. This complies with strict privacy laws like GDPR in Europe, HIPAA in the US, and the LGPD in Brazil. Without that macro integration, without that secure highway system, your highly accurate LSTM network starves for lack of diverse training data.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. The most dangerous hurdle in modern medicine isn't file formats. It isn't software interoperability or secure data transfer. The most dangerous hurdle is biological data skew and the staggering complexity of life itself.
Meaning what exactly?
If you just connect a bunch of databases across the world using federated learning, you are merely amplifying existing blind spots.
Ah, you mean the historical gaps in who actually gets sequenced and studied?
Yes. Currently, 80% of our genomic and medical data is skewed toward Caucasian populations. On the microbiological side, 90% of our bacterial databases are skewed toward gram-negative bacteria because they are just easier to study.
Right.
If you build a massive, perfectly harmonized global data highway on top of that skewed data, you build a flawed highway. The true triumph here is AI correcting that biology at the source. For instance, researchers are using generative adversarial networks, or GANs.
Which are essentially two AI models playing a game of cat and mouse to generate synthetic data, right?
They are. We are using GANs to create highly accurate synthetic South Asian physiological profiles. The AI is essentially hallucinating realistic missing human populations to train diagnostic models to detect lean diabetes.
Because lean diabetes presents differently.
Entirely differently than typical type 2 diabetes, and it is chronically underdiagnosed in South Asian populations. The AI is fixing the biological data gaps. Or look at how graph neural networks, GNNs, map microbial interactions.
Explain the GNN approach, because that's a fascinating mechanism.
Think of a graph neural network like a social network algorithm, but for bacteria. Just like social media knows you are likely to buy a certain product because of who your friends are, a GNN models bacteria as nodes and their chemical byproducts as the connections or edges.
That makes sense.
It figures out that one bacteria thrives because its neighbor bacteria is producing a specific metabolite. It maps out how a bacteria called Bifidobacterium infantis literally feeds Akkermansia mucinifera, which is a crucial anti-inflammatory bacteria in our gut.
Fascinating.
In France, the MetaHit project used these GNNs on 1,200 European metagenomes to predict gut dysbiosis with 90% accuracy. That isn't a triumph of file formatting or federated learning. That is AI illuminating the dark matter of our biology.
I don't dismiss the brilliance of graph neural networks mapping the gut microbiome. That social network analogy makes the complexity very clear, but I have to point out the contradiction in your argument here.
What contradiction?
Correcting data gaps, like generating synthetic South Asian profiles via GANs, is, by definition, a population-level data integration strategy. You are using macro-level statistical modeling to fill gaps in the global data set. You aren't treating an individual, you are fixing a structural population map.
I am fixing the map so that the model can understand the individual's microbiology when they walk into the clinic.
To what end? Because the ultimate future paradigm we are building toward is the creation of universal ecosystems. Look at the Human Cell Atlas. It relies on AI cross-referencing single-cell data from 100 different countries to mathematically model every single tissue type in the human body.
Which is incredible, but
And this cascades into real-world, macro-level environmental interventions. Mexico's MSS health system isn't just treating individual diabetics in a vacuum. They are using massive AI aggregates to redesign local tortillerias for lower glycemic options.
really?
Yeah. Singapore is modeling neighborhood health risks from mass transit data and using that AI insight to subsidize public parks in specific areas. That is the ultimate promise of AI in healthcare, a universal body map that shifts the entire environment we live in, preventing the disease from ever taking root.
See, I disagree entirely with where the paradigm is heading. The future of medicine doesn't belong to generalized public park subsidies or redesigned tortillas, as helpful as those public health measures are. The future belongs to hyper-specific, localized living therapeutics.
Living therapeutics? You mean engineered biological cures?
Yes, generative AI is right now designing synthetic bacteria. It is generating custom CRISPR guides for phage therapy. This means engineering viruses that specifically target and hunt down Pseudomonas infections in the lungs of cystic fibrosis patients.
Wow.
It's moving us past generalized antibiotics, which, as we know, are failing globally due to resistance. Look at gut microbiome therapeutics. A company called Ceres Therapeutics uses AI to profile the DNA of donor stool for fecal microbiota transplants to fight incredibly deadly C. diff infections.
Right. C. diff is notoriously hard to treat.
We are talking about 90% cure rates for an infection that used to be a death sentence for many elderly patients. The AI is identifying the exact biological key in the donor's microbiome to fit the patient's exact biological lock. That is hyper-personalization. We are programming life to cure life. That is not a universal ecosystem. That is a microscopic surgical strike.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning because you're continually treating the human body as an isolated bioreactor. The source material explicitly notes how Australia's Genomic Health Futures program is operating, and it proves my point perfectly.
How so?
They aren't just looking at indigenous genetics in a vacuum to find a biological key. They are actively cross-referencing that indigenous genomic data with macro-level climate models to predict diabetes outbreaks amid warming temperatures.
But the mechanism of the disease inside the patient remains biological. The heat doesn't change the underlying molecular pathways of insulin.
Yes, but the micro-cure is practically useless without the macro-environmental context. If you don't factor in how climate change or urban pollution and Beijing smog or local agricultural diets interact with a person's genome and their microbiome, your living therapeutic is just fighting a downstream symptom while ignoring the upstream cause.
Well,
Even with your incredible example of C. diff or cystic fibrosis phage therapy, AI's ability to map those biological locks and keys relies entirely on pre-training massive foundation models on millions of bacterial proteins from across the globe. The macro network enables the micro-intervention.
and I would counter that. The macro network is merely the scaffolding. Foundation models like Meta's ESM pre-train on 2.5 million bacterial proteomes. True, but they do that to achieve zero-shot prediction of a specific enzyme's function.
Right.
The intelligence of the system, the actual value of all that computing power, is validated only when it correctly folds a protein or identifies an operon that is co-regulated for antibiotic production. The scaffolding is vast, I concede that, but the AI's genius is in the microscopic execution. Think about a company like Carius in the US using AI on plasma next-generation sequencing.
What do they do?
They can detect microscopic traces of pathogen DNA floating in the bloodstream of immunocompromised patients in hours instead of days. That is a micro-level intervention that saves a life in a Sao Paulo ICU today.
But it saves a life in Sao Paulo today because the algorithm was trained on the aggregated global data of millions of other patients yesterday.
But the point of impact, the moment the technology actually matters, is in the individual patient's bloodstream.
Which brings us to a fascinating point of synthesis, I think. Let's take a step back and look at the whole picture we've painted today. My perspective has focused heavily on AI as the ultimate system integrator.
Right.
Whether it's Israel's Khalid harmonizing 5 million electronic health records with wastewater data to predict flu crashes, or AI standardizing the chaotic infrastructure of global medical records via federated learning, I see AI orchestrating a massive symphony of insight. It turns fragmented, siloed data into a unified predictive shield for global populations.
And my perspective highlights AI as the ultimate biological decoder. From utilizing topic modeling on petabytes of metagenomic data to map the 39 trillion microorganisms in our gut, to using LSTM networks to track the sequence of our blood sugar and bypass those expensive clinical clamps. I see AI illuminating the specific solos of genetics and microbiomes that were previously lost in the noise of shotgun sequencing.
Yet, despite our different vantage points, there is a profound point of convergence in the material. Whether we are analyzing global wastewater epidemiology across New York and Rio, or scrutinizing single-cell RNA to engineer CRISPR-phage therapies, we both recognize a fundamental paradigm shift in how human health is managed.
Yeah. The era of reactive, sickness-based medicine is ending. The integration of artificial intelligence is fundamentally shifting healthcare toward a predictive, preventive paradigm. We are no longer waiting for the heart attack. We are mapping the pathways that lead to it years in advance.
We maintain our disagreement, of course, on the primary catalyst for this revolution. I stand by the structural macro network as the true drivers of AI's power. The highway system is what matters.
And I stand by the biological microalgorithm, decoding the organism. The engine of the living therapeutic is what matters.
And that is exactly why understanding both the macro epidemiological perspective and the microgenomic viewpoint is essential to fully grasp the sheer scale of the AI health revolution. You can't just look at the city from space, and you can't just stare at a single brick under a microscope.
To go back to how we started, you need to hear the individual instruments to appreciate their granular complexity. But you need the acoustic design of the entire concert hall to experience the symphony.
Beautifully said. There is so much more nuance to explore in the source material regarding federated learning, quantum AI protein simulations, and edge AI wearables. We highly suggest diving deeper into those texts to explore these complexities for yourselves.
The data is all there, waiting to be cross-referenced and decoded.
Thank you for joining us for this rigorous exchange. We leave it to you, the listener, to decide. Is the future of our health written in the massive global networks that connect us, or in the microscopic codes hidden deep within us? Until next time, keep questioning the consensus.